All right, guys, I am really upset about the Legion Go S, and I'm going to tell you why. This is the most frustrating PC handheld release this year, last year, in the last couple years so far, and I want to tell you about why that is, why it actually makes me frustrated instead of just sad, because there's some really great things and there's some really awful things. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly about the Legion Go S today, and talk about why I really don't think you should buy this handheld. Let's get into it. So today's video is going to be a little bit more of a vlog style episode instead of my typical in-depth review, because I don't think this handheld really justifies a full review at this point. So to understand why I'm really upset about this, I want to talk about what makes this handheld really good first before we get into the negatives. So first off, this is maybe the most comfortable, probably the most comfortable, definitely the most comfortable PC handheld that I have ever held. And I've probably owned too many PC handhelds. I've owned the Ally, I've owned the Steam Deck, I've owned the Legion Go, I've owned handhelds from GPD, from Neo, 1X Player. I've held a lot of handhelds, some of which are not as good as others in terms of how they feel, but this is probably the best. These have these amazing curved grips, and it really just kind of melts into the palm of your hand. This handheld is awesome to hold, okay? It feels super amazing. But there's catches. The controls are awesome. I really love the joysticks on this. They feel really good. They have just the right amount of tension. They're in a good placement, comfortable to use. The triggers are pretty awesome as well. They've got the trigger lock mechanism on the back here, which is something I didn't think I was really gonna use, as I typically just have regular old triggers on my controllers and handhelds, but it's actually pretty cool. There's a lot of games where analog triggers just don't matter. Yeah, if you're playing a racing game or something like that and you need that precision control, it's totally there. But I actually found leaving the trigger locks on most of the time really worked out for me, because it just meant that I had this precise hair action for shooting a gun, swinging a weapon, casting a spell, playing Awoken, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it makes sense, and it's actually probably less fatiguing to not have to constantly be moving the full trigger back and forth on the device. Another standout feature is the face buttons on the device. These face buttons are nice and quiet. They feel excellent. They're a great size. They're nicely rounded. They feel nice. These are just some of the best face buttons that I've seen on a PC handheld, so I really enjoy using those. The bumpers are just okay. They're positioned in a decent position to use them, but they do happen to be a little bit clicky in use, which is not my favorite type of sound or feel, but they're not really a big detractor. As far as the specs go, we do get 32 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte of storage, which is a nice starting point. But if that's what's causing the price to go up on this, that's a big mistake, and we'll talk about that later. And then finally, maybe the best part about this whole thing is just look at this freaking screen, people. It is so vivid. It looks this vivid in real life. You know, the Ally, the Steam Deck OLED even, all good screens, Ally and Claw are nice, but they do not have the level of saturation that Lenovo has pulled off here on the Legion Go. This just really pops. When you look at this display, it's super vivid. I don't know what Lenovo is doing. They're only IPS panels. They don't get those deep blacks that you get out of OLED, but the Go and the Go S both have excellent panels. And in fact, you get some awesome advantages on the Go S here, because you now get VRR. So you're not sacrificing anything coming from the Ally. You're still getting the variable refresh rate, and you're getting that extra bump in saturation and vividness of the screen. So definitely a win-win for the screen on this device. The screen, the comfort, the controls, all the stuff that you feel and see when you're using it is awesome. So why am I so frustrated with this handheld? Well, let's start talking about those pieces. Before I get into the truly bad, I'm just gonna talk about a couple meh things. The first being the trackpad on this unit here. It's small, it's nothing like the Legion Go trackpad, and it's definitely nothing like the Steam Deck trackpad, but it does function for moving the mouse around. It's not terrible, but it's not the best. It also has maybe the world's most annoying bzzz sound when you're using it out of the box. You can turn that off, but then that's kind of a bummer because you get no feedback at all. So you either have the choice of haptic feedback that's really loud and annoying, or you have no feedback at all, and that's just kind of a bummer because you just don't get that tactile response. The Legion Go does the feedback a lot better. The Steam Deck does the feedback way better. and this one just kind of sucks. But at least you can turn it off so you're not annoyed by it. And then also kind of meh, but borderline bad are the speakers on the device. You know, thankfully we do get front firing dual speakers on the device. They're in a nice position. They don't get really blocked by my hands. So overall, the speakers are well placed, but they just don't have any bass. Now, they're not the most offensive speakers that I've ever heard. They still sound decent. They're clear enough. There's not any like super harsh frequencies like some of the INU devices do. It doesn't sound like mud, but just when you compare it to the other flagships in the space, the MSI Claw, which has amazing speakers, the Ally, which has really good speakers, the Steam Deck OLED, which has really good speakers, these just aren't on par with those speakers. The other thing about the Legion Go S is the fan noise, and this is getting into the bad territory. Audio in general is a weak point, whether it's the way it sounds or whether it's the noise that the fan vent produces. When you have this cranked on the performance profile, you can hear the fan noise. It's quite audible. In fact, let me just show that to you real quick. Okay, we're ramping up here. I'm gonna talk so you can hear how my voice is in comparison to the fan. I'm gonna kind of point that towards the mic a little bit. Might hear a little wind noise. Yeah, too much wind noise there, so let's back that back off again. And yeah, to put it mildly, the fan noise is kind of like having a hairdryer in the room. Okay, maybe it's not that bad. To be nice to it, there is not any like high-pitched or weird, super annoying frequencies about it, but overall it is just too loud. And we'll get there later, a little bit of foreshadowing here, but you're gonna have this device in the max performance profile most of the time. And that means you're gonna be hearing the fan most of the time. Okay, so now that we've got the mediocre, bad kind of stuff out of the way, let's get into the ugly. Let's get into why I am so angry about the release of this device. I wanted it to be good so bad. I love the way it feels, but oh my goodness, the performance is miserable on this device. Like, honestly, this is levels of WTF was Lenovo thinking when they released this product. The price that it is, $729 for performance, that, spoiler alert, worse than a Steam Deck at 15 watts. Even when you have a full tilt at 30 watts, it's not like a huge jump. It is markedly worse than a Z1 Extreme, like the Ally or the original Legion Go, and it's just as expensive. In fact, it's more expensive since you can get the Legion Go or the Ally on sale for sometimes, I don't know, $550, $650, something in that range of price. I think the Legion Go even went down as low as $499 recently. So $230 more gets you what? You get more RAM, but way less performance? It's sort of baffling. So to get into that, this handheld uses the new AMD Z2 Go chipset, which I don't really think is anything reinvented. This is really just like a cut down 6800U, which is 2 or 3 generations old at this point, which is really baffling. It only has 4 cores, so if you're playing any games that are CPU demanding, you're gonna be completely bottlenecked by the CPU, regardless of whether the GPU is enough or not. And that's seen in some of the benchmarks. Cyberpunk performs way worse comparatively than some other games do to the Z1 Extreme, and I think it's because it is multi-core CPU hungry. So let's hand it off to future Studio Derek to review the charts and cover some of these numbers with you, and we'll jump back into this narrative portion of the video afterwards. All right, so let's look at performance across 3 different games. I only used 17 watts and 30 watts for the benchmark. One, because 17 and 30 are predefined wattages on the MSI Claw and you can't use a custom TDP, so I wanted to have consistent benchmarking across all 3 devices. And 2, because at the 8 watt lower setting, the Go S and even the Z1E Go to some extent had a hard time even running the games at remotely playable frame rates, so I figured those data points were mostly irrelevant. So jumping in here, we're first going to look at Cyberpunk 2077, which is hands down the worst showing for this device. I'm assuming it's because it is simply CPU bound. For Cyberpunk, we are using the Steam Deck preset bumped up to 1080p with no image scaling. Looking here at 17 watts, we have 17.47 frames per second on the Legion Go S and 32.27 frames per second on the Z1E Legion Go. That amounts to 45.8% less performance at 17 watts and 49.5% less performance at 30 watts, which is a pretty staggering difference to only have half of the performance. The Claw here has a really good showing as it does across all of these benchmarks, but that's not the focus. I just wanted to throw that data point in there just so you can get a ballpark of what current handhelds are capable of. So let's move up to the next benchmark where the gap is not quite as bad. So here we have another benchmarking standard, Shadows of the Tomb Raider. We are using a 1080p resolution, the low preset, and no image scaling. And here we see that the Legion Go S at 17 watts is 36 frames per second, and the Z1E Legion Go at 17 watts is 39 frames per second, and then respectively 42 and 53 frames per second at 30 watts. So we see here that at 17 watts, the difference is not quite as big, but at 30 watts, that Z1E really starts to pull away, presumably just because it has more processing power on tap as you feed it more wattage. This amounts to a 7.7% less performance than the Z1E at 17 watts and 20.8% performance less at 30 watts. So still a fairly significant margin. It does kind of sting paying the same amount to get 20% less performance. So let's move on to our final benchmark. I wanted to include a game that wasn't necessarily a benchmarking standard, but a game that a lot of people are playing right now. So I thought it'd be fun to include Marvel Rivals. At 17 watts, all low settings, 1080p with FSR on balanced, we are seeing 34 frames per second on the Legion Go S and 40 frames per second on the Z1E Legion Go at 17 watts. And then at 30 watts, we're only getting a few more frames per second, up to 40 on the Legion Go S, but we're getting a much larger increase to 55 on the Z1E, where the game is finally in a playable territory. I would say that this game is pretty much unplayable on the Legion Go S. It requires dropping the graphics down to potato level quality just to get 30 to 40 frames per second in game, and it's not a smooth 30 or 40 frames per second. So this is just one reason that this is very hard to recommend handheld. You can't even play a modern game at minimal settings. So now that we've seen just how bad the performance is, comparatively speaking, again, let's circle back to what I mentioned about price. For $200 more, you could get half the performance. That totally makes sense, doesn't it? No, it doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense. Lenovo, what were you thinking? Okay, I'm Average Joe, and I own a Legion Go, and I see that Lenovo has released a new model of the Legion series. Yes, maybe the S means that it's light, so you're thinking it's a little cut down. It doesn't have the removable Joy-Con style controllers or the FPS mode the Legion Go does. You lose out on 0.8 inches of screen. But what you're probably not expecting is to get half the performance for the same or more price than the Legion Go. It's truly baffling. So where does this land on the market? So there's a comment on Reddit from Ben, one of the product managers at Lenovo involved in the Legion Go line, and he said that there are more SKUs coming. So we already know that there is the $499 SteamOS based Legion Go S that's coming out in around May of this year. I believe that's only gonna have 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage, but $230 less, which is a significant difference. But I'd argue that even at $500, compared to the Steam Deck OLED at $550 and an Ally or Legion Go on sale, it's still questionable whether the performance of this device makes sense, although it hurts a lot less at $500. So the community manager said that there's gonna be 6 total SKUs of the Legion Go S coming, with the Z1 Extreme and the Z2 Go as chipset options. Again, this is sort of a WTF moment. So they're going with the full-on laptop manufacturer model, where you have different SKUs that have different CPUs, different RAM configurations, different storage configurations. We're gonna have SteamOS, we're gonna have Windows, we're gonna have 16 gigabytes of RAM, we're gonna have 32 gigabytes of RAM, we're gonna have the Z2 Go chipset, we're gonna have the Z1 Extreme chipset. I don't know about you guys, but the product market for this probably isn't necessarily the gaming laptop enthusiast. It's the person that owns an Xbox or a PS5 at home, and they want to get into PC gaming, so they want to pick up a handheld that does the PC gaming thing for them, and they probably don't want to have to worry about whether the game's going to run. They're just going to assume that most modern games are going to run okay on this hardware. So when you present them with all these different options, they're not necessarily going to know what to pick, and if they pick the wrong version and they get bad performance, they're going to go to bestbuy.com and say, 2 stars, performance sucks, I returned it. Lenovo is simply shooting themselves in the foot here. They probably should have released a Z1E only version, maybe even a 16 gigabyte RAM only version if they could make that cost effective. I mean, I'm thinking if we've got a SteamOS version with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a Z1 Extreme in it, and you priced it at like $650, so $50 less than the regular Legion Go, still got the same performance, but don't have the removable joysticks and a smaller screen. Okay, maybe that makes sense. Legion Go is still gonna be cheaper on sale, but at least it's a newer product with some new features like the VRR screen that you can justify that cost. But at over that cost, it doesn't make sense. And with the Z2 Go chipset, it almost doesn't make sense. Maybe if the SteamOS version comes in at $450. I know that's probably stupid cheap and they can't do it, but when the Steam Deck OLED is what, $550, and it's got basically the same performance and an OLED screen and all that support that Valve has gotten goodwill for over the last couple of years, I just don't know, guys. I don't know. I know that I'm kind of going on and on in this video, but again, I'm super frustrated because I love this handheld. I've never felt something more comfortable. I have carpal tunnel issues that pop up from time to time, so I'm really picky about the ergonomics of the device. In this device, I've played 2 or 3 hour gaming sessions with no fatigue at all. Despite the extra weight, it's just so comfortable and well supported that it's not an issue. But there's no way in hell that I'm gonna spend $730 on this. I am unfortunately gonna be returning this device. I bought it with my own money from Best Buy, and it's gonna go back to Best Buy because I just can't justify this. I've mostly been using it as a game streaming client so that I could use the actual performance that my desktop with the 4070 unit provides. And then that's just silly. I'm $730 for a device that I'm just streaming to. I mean, come on, I can go get a G Cloud secondhand for like 180 bucks on eBay and accomplish largely the same thing. So it just doesn't make sense at all for me. So anyways, I think you guys have heard enough at this point. And you may know from my past reviews that I'm typically sort of a soft recommendation kind of person. I say maybe you might like it if you're into these things, maybe you shouldn't buy it if you're into these things, depends on your priorities. This is one of the first devices that I've reviewed on this channel where I'm just thinking, don't buy it. I'm just gonna tell you not to buy it. And I don't care if that means Lenovo will never send me a review unit in the future. I mean, not that I'm on their list now, but if you guys are listening, I'll happily provide this feedback to you for free if you send me devices. But I digress. You shouldn't buy this. At the minimum, you should wait for the SteamOS version to come out at $499 and buy that one. But even better, you should probably wait to find out what the pricing on the Z1 Extreme models is gonna be. And you should probably wait out to see what the price on the Legion Go 2 is, because then you're gonna get OLED and you're gonna get a chip that's faster than Z1 Extreme, hopefully. So maybe it's better to spend the extra 100, 200, whatever it's gonna be to buy that over the Legion Go S. Anyways, those are just my thoughts on this. Let me know in the comments if you agree that this is like the stupidest thing that Lenovo's ever done in the handheld space, or maybe you bought one and you think it's just so comfortable that you don't care that you spent $700. I mean, that's totally valid. If you want the most comfortable handheld for PC gaming that's ever existed, and you're only gonna play Hades 2 on it, and you don't care about Cyberpunk, then by all means, buy this. Still probably wait for the Steam version, but yeah, that's it. I'm done here. Lenovo, you were so close to making my perfect PC handheld device, and then you just totally missed the mark with the price and performance.